Geb. Published by Wikipedia. Geb was the Egyptian god of the earth and a mythological member of the Ennead of Heliopolis. He could also be considered a father of snakes. It was believed in ancient Egypt that Geb's laughter created earthquakes and that he allowed crops to grow. Name. The name was pronounced as such from the Greek period onward and was originally wrongly read as Seb. The usual Egyptian name was Geb, perhaps the lame one. It was usually spelled with either initial G or sometimes with K point. The latter initial root consonant occurs once in the Middle Kingdom coffin texts, more often in 21st dynasty mythological papyri as well as in a text from the Ptolemaic tomb of Petosiris at Tuna el Gebel, or the name was written with initial hard K, as e.g. in a 30th dynasty papyrus text in the Brooklyn Museum dealing with descriptions of and remedies against snakes. Role and development. The oldest representation in a fragmentary relief of the god was as an anthropomorphic bearded being accompanied by his name, and dating from King Djoser's reign, 3rd dynasty, and was found in Heliopolis. However, the god never received a temple of his own. In later times he could also be depicted as a ram, a bull, or a crocodile. Geb was frequently feared as father of snakes. In a coffin text spell, Geb was described as father of the mythological snake Nehebkau of primeval times. In more mythology, Geb also often occurs as a primeval divine king of Egypt from whom his son Osiris and his grandson Horus inherited the land after many contendings with the disruptive god Set, brother and killer of Osiris. Geb could also be regarded as personified fertile earth and barren desert, the latter containing the dead or setting them free from their tombs, metaphorically described as Geb opening his jaws, or imprisoning those they're not worthy to go to the fertile northeastern heavenly field of reeds. In the latter case, one of his otherworldly attributes was an ominous jackal-headed stave rising from the ground onto which enemies could be bound. In the Heliopolitan Ennead, Geb is the husband of Nut, the sky or visible daytime and nightly firmament, the son of the earlier primordial elements Tefnut and Shu, and the father to the 4 lesser gods of the system, Osiris, Seth, Isis, and Nephthys. In this context, Geb was believed to have originally been engaged with Nut and had to be separated from her by Shu, god of the air. Consequently, in mythological depictions, Geb was shown as a man reclining, sometimes with his phallus still pointed towards Nut. Geb and Nut together formed the permanent boundary between the primeval waters and the newly created world. As time progressed, the deity became more associated with the habitable land of Egypt and also as one of its early rulers. As a chthonic deity, he became naturally associated with the underworld, fresh waters, and with vegetation, barley being said to grow upon his ribs, and was depicted with plants and other green patches on his body. His association with vegetation, healing, and sometimes with the underworld and royalty brought Geb the occasional interpretation that he was the husband of Renenute, a minor goddess of the harvest and also mythological caretaker of the young king in the shape of a cobra, who herself could also be regarded as the mother of Nehebkau, a primeval snake god associated with the underworld. He is also equated by classical authors as the Greek titan Cronus. Ptah and Ra, creator deities, usually begin the list of divine ancestors. There is speculation between Shu and Geb and who was the first god king of Egypt. The story of how Shu, Geb, and Nut were separated in order to create the cosmos is now being interpreted in more human terms, exposing the hostility and sexual jealousy. Between the father-son jealousy and Shu rebelling against the divine order, Geb challenges Shu's leadership. Geb takes Shu's wife, Tefnut, as his chief queen, separating Shu from his sister wife. Just as Shu had previously done to him, in the Book of the Heavenly Cow, it is implied that Geb is the heir of the departing sun god. After Geb passed on the throne to Osiris, his son, he then took on a role of a judge in the divine tribunal of the gods. Goose. Some Egyptologists have stated that Geb was associated with a mythological divine creator goose who had laid a world egg from which the sun and/or the world had sprung. This theory is assumed to be incorrect and to be a result of confusing the divine name, Geb, with that of a white-fronted goose, also called originally GB, lame one, stumbler. This bird sign is used only as a phonogram in order to spell the name of the god. An alternative ancient name for this goose species was TRP, meaning similarly walk like a drunk, stumbler. The white-fronted goose is never found as a cultic symbol or holy bird of Geb. The mythological creator, Goose, referred to above, was called Nggwr, Great Honker, and always depicted as a Nile goose, fox goose who ornithologically belongs to a separate genus and whose usual Egyptian name was Smn, Coptic Smon. A colored vignette irrefutably depicts a Nile goose with an open beak in a context of solar creation on a mythological papyrus dating from the 21st dynasty. Similar images of this divine bird are to be found on temple walls, showing a scene of the king standing on a papyrus raft and ritually plucking papyrus for the Theban god Amun-Re-Kamudif. The latter Theban creator god could be embodied in a Nile goose, but never in a white-fronted goose. In underworld books, a diacritic goose sign was sometimes depicted on top of the head of a standing anonymous male anthropomorphic deity, pointing to Geb's identity. Geb himself was never depicted as a Nile goose, as later was Amun, called on some new kingdom stele explicitly, Amun, the beautiful Smn goose. The only clear pictorial confusion between the hieroglyphs of a white-fronted goose and a Nile goose in the spelling of the name Geb occurs in the rock-cut tomb of the provincial governor Sarenput II on the Kuba el Hawa desert ridge, namely on the left wall near the open doorway, in the first line of the brightly painted funerary offering formula. This confusion is to be compared with the frequent hacking out by Akhenaten's agents of the sign of the pintail duck in the royal title, Son of Re, especially in Theban temples, where they confused the duck sign with that of a Nile goose regarded as a form of the then forbidden god Amun. Geb alias Cronus. In Greco-Roman Egypt, Geb was equated with the Greek god Cronus, because he held a quite similar position in the Greek pantheon, as the father of the gods Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, as Geb did in Egyptian mythology. This equation is particularly well attested in Tebtunis in the southern Fayum. Geb and Cronus were here part of a local version of the cult of Sobek, the crocodile god. The equation was shown on the one hand in the local iconography of the gods, in which Geb was depicted as a man with attributes of Cronus and Cronus with attributes of Geb. On the other hand, the priests of the local main temple identified themselves in Egyptian texts as priests of Sonebtunis Geb, but in Greek texts as priests of Sonebtunis Cronus. Accordingly, Egyptian names formed with the name of the god Geb were just as popular among local villagers as Greek names derived from Cronus, especially the name Cronion.